It's a beautiful Wednesday morning, and we are delighted to be alive and to do this with you. Of course, this is Rise and Shine, and we're coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State, Nigeria. My name is Uyai American. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
I am Francis United. Glad to have you join us today. It's Wednesday, midweek, and a lot has been happening from Monday up until today. We still have a couple more days. And as usual, we'll be talking Nigeria, bringing you up a lot has been happening within the course of the last 24 hours, but for me, this
We'll be talking about this morning, and also would love to remind all of which you can find at spectrumtv.ng. We'd like to take your contributions, your concerns, and what are your thoughts about some of these issues happening. But of course, it's Wednesday morning, and talking Nigeria, there's a full bouquet of conversation that we will be having with you this very morning. But we'll get to the very, very top this morning, and we're going to look at the public-private sector. Mergers. There's been several conversations even in the past week looking at how the public sector and the private sector can come together and collaborate, just so that we can move the economy forward. And, some of these conversations about developmental strides that the federal government could be involved in. We know that in most countries of the world, Nigeria included, private sector holds really strong power in terms of development. The private sector employs we could say about half the population of citizens in most countries of the world. Now that we are even clamoring for more entrepreneurial activities, we see an increase in this. And just this morning, we see the fact that Tony Elumelu, who is one of the foremost private sector leaders that we have in the country, has met with President Tinubu and says the sector is encouraged by the president's policies as he has reeled out since assumption of office. And first of all, that's a really good move there by Tony Elumelu, and we'll just look into breaking down some of the conversations this morning.
Well, of course, we know that the private sector operates in a way that helps the state and the federal government. And as far as business is concerned, as far as growing the economy of Nigeria is concerned, these all sectors are in the hands of entrepreneurs, the likes of Todio Lumelu, who has contributed significantly to growing the nation's economy. You recall just in the recent times, the Transcorp company were in the news, or was in the news, as a result of the buy-ins by Todio Lumelu. And of course, we're also talking about his investment into the power sector. So this is one person whose investment cuts across the hospitality industries, transport, and then, of course, getting into the power sector. It's an all-round. Of course, we also talk about some investment of his in the petroleum sector. So,
but we also have him strongly in the finance. I mean, captain of one of the captains of the United Bank of Africa.
of course, so it's an all-round kind of investor. So these are persons you definitely don't want to neglect or don't want to ignore when you're making policies, not just the persons but the sector itself, because as businessmen, business captains of industries, they definitely know the kinds of policies that will benefit the generality of people doing business. And we also recall that one of the things President Ahmed Bola Tinubu did say, that and of course, it was further reinforced, restated by the Senate President Godswill Akpabio, that this administration is going to focus a lot more attention in making legislations that will be able to shore up the business environment and make it a lot more friendly, a lot more accessible, a lot more attractive for foreign direct investors to come into the country. And then, of course, that will lead to building up the economy, because the more business-friendly environment you have, the more likely investors are going to come in. The more investors you have, the more job opportunities you have. The more job opportunities, of course, the more people are able to fend for themselves, pay tax, and of course that in turn generates revenue for the country. So of course it's a steps taken in the right direction.
Yeah, of course, we saw the fact that Chairman of Hair Holding, the owner of the United Bank of Africa, paid a visit to the president yesterday. And of course, that was his first visit since the president has been sworn in. Of course, he said his meeting with the president was on private grounds, but then he also talked about the fact that as one of the leaders in the private sector, they are deeply encouraged by the policies of the government. Now, of course, looking at the bold decisions of President Bola Tinubu, and of course, they're hoping that with the fullness of time, Nigerians will benefit from some of these policies that have been reeled out by the president so far. Of course, like Tony Elumelu rightly noted, he said most of these policies are about the Nigerian people and it's about the youth as well. Of course, when we are talking about some of the policies that the president has reeled out, that has been reeled out since president's assumption of office, would look at, and then when we look at the private sector, we should also look at, first of all, the floating of the naira and its competitive activity against the dollar, back and forth. How has that favored or disfavored, the private sector business owners and, people who run businesses in the private sector? Now, if you have the likes of Tony Elumelu saying they see the good in these kinds of, policies, then we would have to entirely review some of our conversations around these policies. We know that one thing that has been paramount is that in the long run, we are going to see the benefits of some of these policies that have been reeled out by the government. But even, I think that was yesterday now, we still had conversation of, some of the good activities that the Naira has had since it was floated and, some of those things. So we see the fact that, Tony Elumelu has said the private sector is encouraged by the president's policies. So are we looking at how in the long run some of these policies are going to expand very greatly the private sector and also impact on the public-private collaborations that we're going to see in the country? But of course, like you had rightly said, Tony Elumelu is a mega voice when it comes to the private sector in the country, cuts across different sectors, as we have been well told. That's a good one,
it's definitely a good one, but then of course there are always two sides to a story. Recall Tony Elumelu made way the president. He was pictured with the president-elect at then, Ahmed Bola Tinubu. Of course, I'm going to congratulate the president-elect at then. Of course, there were political undertones to the meeting, which many are beginning to whip up and beginning to ask questions whether Tony Elumelu is speaking truly as a businessman or a businessman who might be turning a politician pretty soon. And of course, that's just a part of the concern. But if we have to look at some of the decisions made by we're talking about the unification of the Naira, you're talking about the inauguration of the Economic Council, you're talking about the removal of the governor and the reported reforms within the sector. Of course, the floating of the Naira is part of that decision. Removal of fuel subsidy, a very big major one that has been described as the big game changer. Dissolution of governing boards of federal government parastatals with a view to reforming them. Of course, a lot of these has been pointed as one of the key indices that will transform the business environment. Of course, just I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, we saw the president sign into law the Electricity Act, which of course makes it possible for Nigerians to venture into business within the power sector. And it takes my mind back to a comment made by our very own CEO, Tony Efia,
doing at one of our sister stations 10th anniversary, calling on Akwa Ibomites who are business savvy to look into diversifying into the power sector, which of course will now give a variety of opportunities for power consumers to now have options. And of course, if these and that completely significantly improves the quality of power that Nigerians get for their money. Of course, we see that we saw that happen in the telecom sector when it was just one company. You know, when it was just one company, we had challenges. You didn't know where to go to when you had complaints that was not attended to. But with the emergence of multiple, service providers, we saw competition. Literally, everybody is scampering for the market, knowing full well if you don't treat your customers well, they're definitely going to have other options to turn to. So if we get to see a lot more people, taking advantage of the deregulation, the then in terms of power supply. I know that as we sit here, there are communities who will still call if we were to open the phone lines and tell you we keep paying for darkness. You literally don't get light in 30 days in a month, and then the days you get to see light consistently for 24 hours, 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, then you'll be expecting the collectors to land on your doorsteps. And in the instance that you do not pay up, you get disconnected. Of course, this disconnection is also against the law because by right and by law, Nigerians are supposed to be given notice days before disconnection actually happened. But you don't see that happening in Nigeria, and probably these guys just do things and go scot-free. So it's a welcome development. We do hope, like Tony Olumelu has said, the president's body language, the president's business policies will chart the right course for the business environment to open up. I mean, the more entrepreneurs we have, the more sustainable business brands we have, the better it is for us.
Well, the better it is for us, of course. But moving from that particular story, conversations of palliatives are springing up across different state governments, including the FCT. Yesterday, we saw Nyesom Wike, Minister of the FCT, saying that 2 billion naira has been dispersed to the FCT to be able to handle, to cushion the effect of the subsidy removal. And of course, we saw Nyesom Wike saying that most of that money is going to be invested into transportation for the people of the FCT and some other cushioning effect. But bringing that conversation back home, of course, remember yesterday we had talked about the fact that the governor of Akwa Ibom State, Pastor Moino, had set up a 10-man committee on the 2nd of August to be able to look into the modalities that will be necessary to distribute these palliatives. And he had said, let's have a think tank as to how exactly we can mitigate the effects of the subsidy removal on Akwa Ibomites. Of course, we see the fact that the palliative committee of Akwa Ibom State recommended certain things to the state governor. Of course, that recommendation was delivered to the state government yesterday, and as part of the recommendations given by the palliative committee, we see the fact that 4 working days have been requested by the state government for all categories of civil servants in this state. They also talked about the need to reduce the cost of daily tickets for transport operators. We know that this is one of the things that transport operators really clamor about in the state. The incessant taxation sometimes is from different organizations at the same time. But we saw the palliative committee ask that the cost of daily tickets for transport operators be cut down. Also asked for a reduction in the price of daily tickets for market women. We're also looking at the fact that as well as provision of free drugs for pregnant women, children, and the elderly in the state. So these are some of the recommendations that were set forth by the team as led by Inobo Onwa, of course, who was the chairman of the committee and secretary to the state government. So we're looking at 4 cardinal issues. Reduce tickets to market women, to transport operators in the state, cut working days to 4 days in a week, and also give free medication to pregnant women, children, and the elderly in the state.
Well, going through the recommendations of the palliative committee, two things stood out for me. One, the recommendation of how this palliative is going to be shared, if it's actually going to get to the people. I appreciate the fact that the committee recommended that another subcommittees be set up at the grassroots level that will comprise of student leaders, will comprise of traditional leaders, village heads, clan heads, paramount rulers, youth leaders, and all of that to ensure that these palliatives get sent down to the grassroots. I also love the fact that they recommended for bursary to be paid to students, which is very significant, and it's highly commendable. But then, of course, there is an aspect, a section of the society that was left out, and that has already, as usual, as expected, as it is their right, has generated an outcry, talking about the recommendation. Of course, expect that recommended that a lot more attention be paid into servicing the unpaid debt or emolument of retirees in the state. Of course, we're hoping that, as the Akwa Ibom cried out to the governors yesterday when the report surfaced, they're going to have a rethink. Of course, we also know that the president, the governor of Akwa Ibom State, did also, while responding, said the state government is initiating one project, one local government, to ensure that contracts are given to people across the respective local government, who will in turn employ people within these local government areas. And of course, when you have contract given to people there, and the workforce is from the local government area, you're employing a lot more people, they are increasing their purchasing power, and of course that economy still really circulates around the community. But of course, amidst all of this is still the question of waiting to see how the implementation will be done. Because yes, we always say government are not bereft of ideas and not bereft of beautiful policies, but the problem has always gone down to implementation. Honesty, sincerity, transparency in ensuring that those recommendations that has been accepted will be implemented to the later. Of course, we also know that the state governor had said, the recommendations of the committee will be discussed at the state A schools. I think that's tomorrow, 31st, being Thursday, and they normally hold it. And at the end of that, he's going to speak about what has been said, what has been agreed upon, and how the modalities would go. He also promised that between tomorrow, being 31st, and 1st of September, we're going to see the palliatives head to the local government level, and then the distribution.
Well, it's most of the cardinal points with regards to that conversation. Beyond, the think tank committee thinking and bringing this resolve to the state government, of course, some of which the governor had said were part of their own, due process, things they had been thinking up, as ways to mitigate this. So let us see the implementation, cutting down working days to 4, providing, transportation cushioning for the people. We need to begin to see this, because truth be told, the times have really, really changed. We need to see how citizens can keep afloat until everything bounces back. But of course, there's a lot of conversation still going on at this time. We're going to be moving straight to our major stories, looking at the fact that, of course, the Niger junta is, what would I call it? It's beginning to have different heads and different turns with regards to that particular situation. But of course, United Nations yesterday said they've put forward an exemption request for relief supplies to the Niger Republic, and of course, they're hoping that the Republic submits the economic community, submits the same to the ECOWAS bloc. Of course, they're asking that the UN. Of course, the UN said these sanctions on Niger were blocking vital humanitarian and aid such as food and medicine. But of course, we're not going to be having this conversation on our own this morning. Deyemi Saka is going to be joining us in a bit. Let's just look at all the up and all the turns and twists with regards to this particular situation. But of course, there's a lot happening. We also see the fact that the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, representative for Niger, Mano Gimnak, stated this at a press conference in Geneva. So we're looking at this is really evolving in a way that if we don't catch it, because first question is how come we are already looking at humanitarian aid. First of all, it was just about ousting the president of the country. Francis, do not also forget that most citizens in the country had come out in celebratory protests of the move made by the junta. So when we are beginning to see moves being made for humanitarian aid, are there sublime conversations about the junta that we may not be considering?
Well, definitely. I think one of the conversations that we kickstarted here when the military junta started was that with every overthrowing of a government, there is always going to be a humanitarian crisis. And of course, those humanitarian crises is a lot more made worse by the military junta and the sanctions by different foreign bodies, the ECOWAS, the AU, and other foreign agencies that are trying the possible best to ensure that Niger reinstates and reinstalls the democratically elected president Bazoum. We anticipated those humanitarian crises to come from Niger in a time soon. It's just coming up now. And one thing that ECOWAS needs to look at while we are drumming the consciousness, while they're asking for shorter transition period from the junta, is also to make sure that the people of Niger do not get to suffer the brunt of what is happening. Because if we look at both sides of the coin, yes, what is happening, the military coup is not right. Of course, we agree to that point. But also, beyond the military coup, the ECOWAS seeking to restore democracy is a step taken in the right direction. But then, should the people of Niger suffer because of a few people who have chosen to break the law? That's a question that we all should answer with a human heart and with a human face. And the answer obviously is no. So I'm hoping that with the presentation of this, we'll get to see the leadership of ECOWAS join force and then look past the crime that is being committed in Niger and look into settling the interests of the Niger people first and foremost, because the people will need to be alive for transition to actually happen. And in the instance that hunger begins to spread, we know with hunger, with starvation, there are chances of other criminal activities, spreading out. There are chances of other factions spreading up. The insecurity rising past just the military coup that we are seeing. Of course, we are not forgetting in a hurry the jihadist attack that claimed the lives of some of the military personnel, just recently, and it was attributed to the coup in Niger happening. So if we look at all the indices, look at the possibility of other threats emerging as a result of the military coup, then it should make it easy for the leadership of ECOWAS to consider allowing a window for humanitarian aid to actually get to the people. It would be in the interest of the interest of the growth and development of the people, the interest of sustenance of the people of Niger, for aid to be provided. And I'm also hoping that while the military junta allows for these and appeals for these, they're also ready to make available the possible environment that will engender that. Because we've seen conversations around other countries where military, the insecurity there is a threat to people who are providing the humanitarian aid. And in instances like that, the first point of action will be to recall, back those volunteers who are helping to take the aid to the people who truly need them. But we do hope to see a different light coming from the ECOWAS and, of course, the junta leadership and other organizations around.
Well, it's part of this conversation is the fact that there are trucks with food and humanitarian aid piling up at Niger's land borders since the military coup on the 26th of July. Of course, this also we have seen even Ghana, reach out and say that the cost of food items have continued to increase since that coup and some of the sanctions being placed on Niger. Of course, we saw of course Niger as a nation is a landlocked nation, so they share boundaries with several other West African countries to that for that matter. So some of the sanctions that they have been put on Niger has locked the nation in, and we're not seeing transportation of even food items and the likes. So of course UN is saying we have food items, humanitarian aid, medicine, and the likes being stuck on the corridors, not being able to get into Niger. So they're asking that the ECOWAS consider some of the sanctions that has been placed on the nation, just so that aid can come to some of these people that have been hit. Let's not also forget that Niger is said to be one of the poorest countries in Africa. So it's more like with or without this coup in place, citizens of Niger would always need humanitarian aid. So we're looking at the food, we're looking at the medicine and other things that will be necessary for them to have life steady. Of course, the immediate goods affected is going to be food, and then it's going to be access to medicine and drugs, the like. So of course we are seeing how ECOWAS, as led by President Bola Tinubu at this time, can maybe relax some of the sanctions, just so that ease can come to the conversation being had. But let's see if the Misaka is available to us, so that we don't what do we call it, extend, exhaust all of the conversations we have. Okay, Demi is on the line. Good morning, Demi Saka. Good to have you on the show this morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very fine, thank you. Thank you for the quick response. We need to look at some of the developing issues in Niger. Of course, Francis is with me here this morning.
Good morning, Demi. Welcome to Rise and Shine.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we see the fact that the United Nations is seeking exemption from the ECOWAS bloc for them to be able to take in humanitarian aid into Niger. We're looking at the fact that food and medicine has been stuck on the corridors of Niger since the 26th of July, since the president was ousted. How come we are already having conversations of humanitarian aid in Niger? Are we seeing the fact that maybe this issue has skyrocketed to things that we may not yet be seeing on mainstream media?
Well, for me, I believe it's just the international community or global community trying to tighten the noise around the neck of the Niger Republic. But I think they've come to the realization that Nigerians are in love with the junta and they're raising it. I tell people as much as democracy is the best form of government and gives freedom, free markets and everything, but we should understand democracy works and is always impaired with capitalism. And capitalism, because of our peculiarity in Africa, has not favored us. By extension, democracy is failing in Africa. And there's going to be a new wave of nationalism and idealism in Africa, which has in turn make coup plots of big military takeover or military junta appealing. As we speak, some few minutes ago, Ali Bongo was also ousted as the president of Gabon. He took over from his father in 2009. The military coup just went down in Gabon, a successful one. So what am I saying? The global community, as I can tell you, for advisory groups, strategic groups, foreign policy groups, is telling themselves that democracy is in Africa, and let's allow Africa to determine or decide what they want for themselves. So that is why rather than cause crisis for the Niger military junta, they are ready to now work with them, and that's what's going to happen. That is why you see United Nations now saying, okay, let's get the aids in, because they felt not bringing the aids in, black, if I can use the word, blackmailing the military junta, sanctions there and there will make the people turn against it, but they realize that the result of the people is getting stronger day by day. And it's all about service to humanity. So let us save humanity.
We also see here that as part of the development with regards to the Niger junta, Algeria is demanding 6-month transition period from the Niger junta. Of course, remember that they had said they would use a window of 3 years to transit back to democratically elected government. And they had said they promised that nothing will extend the 3-year period. Of course, ECOWAS outrightly kicked against that and said they will not take that. Now, Algeria is asking them to do so in 6 months. Do you think that this is something that is even possible? Of course, reading the body language of the Niger junta leaders thus far.
Well, as much as we believe that Niger is a charter, a signatory to the ECOWAS charter, and bound by it and everything, we cannot, impose on the sovereignty of the Niger Republic. Trust me, those guys will not. Those guys will even do beyond 3 years. Those guys might just, because they're asking you, given Algeria is proposing 6 months. A coup just went down in Gabon. Let's have 3 more successful coups in Africa across the continent. Those guys will sit tight in power. And like I said, we're going to have what we can call militocracy. A blend between military rule and democratic, or a fusion of military and civilian rule, and that is what is going to happen.
But then, we are actually really vying closer and closer to, that militocracy that you're just talking about. I mean, looking at the breaking story this morning about Gabon and the fact that the leader has been ousted also by military coup, are we not seeing too many incessant coups in Africa? What is really the brain behind these coups, if you would just oblige us?
I will tell you this. It's endemic poverty in the face of, enormous natural resources. It's a synthetic rulership by some presidents or leaders of some countries. Insecurity, ethnic tension. Whether I would like it or not, Africa is a theater of, conflict sponsored by external interests. Where a lot of people want to look at some other countries, just for 1 or 2 countries, I said beyond that. I fear for 2 countries, and I keep saying this. I think Nigeria should be careful how it jumps into this whole thing. And I'll say this and I'll put it out there again. The next country on the table is Cameroon. If Cameroon falls, I can put my money on it that Benin Republic and Togo will fall in quick succession. And once that falls in quick succession, the 2 biggest democracies in West Africa has been threatened. Nigeria that just came out of a disputed election, and Ghana that is going into an election next year. Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire have just been, a time bomb ticking away. We need to wake up. We need to do the right things. We need to be careful. We need to do policies. We need to heal wounds. This is not the time to be thumping chairs. This is not the time to be bragging. This is not the time to say winner takes all.
All right, Saka, I know that the Gabon story is just another shocker for the continent of Africa this morning. And part of the conversations that we had when this happened in Niger was that this might just become a regular trend. And if we are not careful, if the leaders across the African countries are not careful, if they do not ensure accountability, transparency, and good governance to the people, we might be waking up to see practically all of the African countries being, overthrown by the military. Is this something that, the ECOWAS, the African Union, and other foreign organizations or agencies needs to focus more attention to in order to address?
I think there's a need for Africa, EU, and ECOWAS to sit down and tell themselves, are we going to adopt a model in Africa across the continent? Is it going to be 5 years single time, 7 years single time, and every leader is a signatory to the fact that you're not changing the constitution? No matter how benevolent, another instance is no matter how benevolent Paul Kagame is in Rwanda, it's also going to happen in Rwanda someday. And because these things is gaining popularity and spreading, people should start looking at their back.
But do you believe if the African leaders get to prioritize good governance, if the people get to see commensurate infrastructural development, healthcare, and development across, see the economy working, people having, true dividends of democracy across board, that we still have these kinds of, military takeover happening?
If we have a semblance of good governance, where the tenets of either democracy or any form of government is running, and dividends of it is evident in the lives of the people, the military coup, military interventions will not will be resisted by the people. But in a situation where you have the people hungry, dying, feeling unsafe, feeling highly insecure, and impoverished, anybody that presents himself or wears the garb of Messiah will be welcome with, riding a donkey, stepping on palm leaves into the city. So I think it's just time for Africa. Like I said, the quick fixing solution to me is to have an AU emergency congress or meeting with ECOWAS, and let all leaders be taught to please don't touch your constitution. Please go back to the constitution and give you maybe 1 year, 7 years, one time 7 years, and you leave office. If you think you want to enjoy the spoil of office, if you don't want to, at least come even with constitutions that include rotational presidency, because Africa. I remember listening to a speech of former President Kenyatta of Kenya. He said there's a cabinet minister of his that is his cousin is also a cabinet minister in Uganda. That their colonial masters came and was dividing them, creating borders and what have you. That Africa is a continent of tribes. And by the new nomenclature or demarcation by colonial masters, you have a convergence of many tribes in a nation, or ethnic nationalities within a nation. Let your constitution reflect that power sharing or rotational place. So every tribe feels that form of that inclusion, that sense of belonging. So they know that at any point in time, this thing is going to go around and get to us. There has to be that communal feeling, that communal leadership, that communal governance. That's the only way out of the crisis in Africa, where the leader will sit in office and think that I have to go outside the stronger tribe. I want to make my tribe or ethnic nationality the strongest. But just 7 years, and before it comes back to his tribe, it might be like 700 years. If you have 100 tribes in your country, he will probably want to do his best to make sure the 7 years get accountable and go down in history as a good one for his tribe and for himself.
So, Damien, I want to ask you,
just before we let you go this morning, because we've listened to some of the strong points that you have raised, as part of that being the fact that coups have become, it's like a present day reality in Africa. Is this something that is the least bit possible? Is this something we need to be careful about in Nigeria? It is becoming popular in Africa. We know that just a few weeks ago we had the military in Nigeria come out to say that a coup will never be possible in Nigeria. They fully back the presidency of Bola Ahmed Tinubu and appreciate democracy. But all of the undertones and handwriting we see in Africa, what should we be careful about?
Anybody that mentions coup in a democracy, even it's seen as treason, as committed treason, or it's so. Especially the military will come out to say there will be no coup in Africa, in Nigeria. But for me, it's not reason for us to be worrisome, because like they're having modern day Robin Hoods across Africa. If they are not careful, these new ways will consume Africa, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. We must say a big thank you to you, our public affairs analyst, Demi Saka, for joining us this morning and looking at the issues happening in Niger this morning. We do hope that you have a very splendid day.
And you too, man.
Thank you, dear Misaka. Well, strong conversations there. We see the handwriting on the wall for the rest of Africa. Dear Misaka has rightly noted how and where, Africa and African leaders need to be careful, what we need to do differently so that we can stem the tide. Like he said, it's meritocracy. Is it a thing that we need to expect? Is this something we need to normalize? What are the conversations that African leaders need to be having at this time? But of course, today, like I said, serious issues happening across the country, and serious issues happening across the state government also. We're going to be speaking with the Akwa Ibom State Police PRO, the person of Odiko McDon. There were some issues that sprung up somewhere in the afternoon of yesterday in Akwa Ibom State, where we saw the youth of the state come together under the auspices of, Akwa Ibom State youth to protest, saying that, unemployment is a real thing for them, and they're requesting 3% out of the oil derivation funds that are usually being given to the state. We saw, of course, that that protest got intense to a very large extent until the police had to come use checkers to, disperse these youths yesterday. Let's look at, the rising concerns with regards to these kinds of issues in the state at this time. Of course, we'll also say feel free to make use of our phone lines and our social media handles to give us your concerns. Were you around the access of Wellington Bassey that leads all the way to the Hilltop Mansion? What exactly is going on around us? Of course, the police PPRO is joining us this morning to have that particular conversation.
Well, yesterday, I can't deny the fact that there were different calls. I got different calls from, Akwa Ibomites calling my attention to the incident. There were even allegations that it was not just tear gas canisters that were thrown at the peaceful protesters, but also bullets were fired into the crowd of protesters. But that, of course, is subject to, the confirmation of the police PPRO in the state, and of course, the people who call that also allege of people being gunned down, which of course yet to see the footages of the people that were gunned down. They had promised to get to share with us. But beyond that, I know, having conversations with the leadership of the National Youth Council of Nigeria, Akwa Ibom State chapter, one of the advocacies they were back in the state to make was towards the ensuring that a derivation of 13% is being distributed. I recall back in my school days, we had people from Bayelsa State, Onne to be precise, who were literally placed on salaries as a result of the oil money that was accruing to the state. I know that part of the conversations those guys used to have as a demo was that this was part of the benefit that accrues to the youth and is distributed based on family lines, particularly to those families who are not employed or within the employs of either the state government or the federal government, or in the organized private sector, or even within the oil companies themselves. Of course, they also talked about advocacy to ensure that multinationals operating in Akwa Ibom State are made to pay the attention to the employment quota that we have across border by reason of the local content law in Nigeria, which many have said is not being implemented in Akwa Ibom State as we speak. But getting to see peaceful protesters being tear gas. Just recently, when we saw the NLC, TUC, and Nigerians protesting the fuel subsidy removal, we saw the governor coming out, to speak to the protesters, and it was expected, as it is the rights of Akwa Ibomites to peacefully, protest whatever injustice that is being done to them, to actually see the leadership of the state, coming out. So it was a shocking, reality for the Akwa Ibom youth to see that instead of the leadership of the state coming to speak with them, allegedly, it was police that were sent. But we have to see, get to hear all sides of the story. We've heard from the youths and some people who were there, but let's get to hear from the police. And I'm hoping that SP Odiko McDon will give more clarity on the part of the Nigerian Police Force, Akwa Ibom State Command.
Well, strong conversations. Of course, we are still on standby to get the police PPRO to join us this morning, to join us. Of course, we also have, whilst we try to wait for the police PPRO to join us, part of these kinds of concerns is how does it affect the security architecture of the state when these kinds of things happen. Like you rightly said, we got those kinds of calls. People were scampering, to safety. But then let's also look at how the youth also interfere with developmental strides of the state government. When we move ahead, we know 13% derivation is a big deal for the Akwa Ibom community. Last year, it caused a row between, the South-South governors, where we had former Governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, call out the fact that, oh, this is what we received from the federal government as 13% derivative. And people began to ask, what are these state governments using this money to do? Now we see, the citizens coming out to say, oh, we need 3% of these particular monies to be given to the youth. But now, in ways, at times when we see the government or even other agencies within the government move to bring projects to rural communities, it is still the same set of youth across different communities now that also arise to get in the way of development. For instance, in Ibiakuran here, we've been talking about the fact that the roads leading to Spectrum Television, the whole conglomerate of TAF Media, is an entire mess. Both ends of the road, the two entryways to the community, terribly bad. And then, one of the government agencies now took on the responsibility to try and repair, one end of the road. But then we saw the community members arising, begin to steal these materials, steal roads, steal cement, and all of those kinds of things. Yes, we saw the police wade into the situation and make the arrest. But how does this affect us as a people? On one hand, we are asking state governments and federal government to arise to the occasion and get development into the rural communities. But oftentimes, like I would always ask when I go to communities, when the government comes into your community, will you allow them to get the work done? Now, some of the scare that has arisen as a result of this is people asking, if this agency now abandons the work that they came to this community to do, who will be blamed?
Well, this conversation is something that I would always, as a person, first and foremost, blame the leadership of the community. Because I think it was just about 2 weeks ago that the governor of Akwa Ibom State reiterated his standpoint and the standpoint of his government that when projects are cited in your community, and then for whatever reason there is an act of vandalism, an act of theft, an act of whatever criminal activities is being experienced on the site of those projects, it is the community leaders that will be held accountable. The youth leader, the village head, the paramount ruler of that environment are those who will be held accountable. But of course, we'll head back to this conversation. We've been joined by the PPRO in Akwa Ibom State, SP Odiko Magdan. Good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
Very good to have you on the show this morning, Rise and Shine. Thank you for responding to us on such short notice. But we just got wind of that, issue that happened along Willington Bassey, heading all the way to the government house yesterday. Akwa Ibom State youths came out to protest unemployment and other related issues. But they're asking the state government to give them 3% out of the 13% derivative. Now, what irked our attention is the fact that it was reported that the police had to wade into the situation yesterday, and tear gas was used to disperse, that particular protest yesterday. How was the situation of things out there yesterday, PPRO, sir?
Protest is the fundamental right. When we talk about a peaceful protest, we are not against peaceful protests. We are giving to peaceful protests. We respect that rights of association, freedoms of association, freedom of expression, and all that. But what we will not take is violent protest. Indeed, the youth have something to say, but the manner in which they communicate or pass such information to the government matter. If there are grievances that needed to be ventilated, How do you do it? What best ways can you communicate or pass message to the government? It's fundamental. What transpired yesterday, where they came to pass a message to the government, but of course, security agencies are saddled with the responsibility of maintaining law and order, and then providing the biggest security for the good people of the state. So when they came, they had been addressed by the Commissioner of Police, P.P. Olatoye Dorosimi, who in his very philosophical manner was able to make them realize the need to maintain peaceful coexistence and ventilate their grievances in the right way, following the stipulations of the law. And then again, the Commander Troop Brigade was on ground, including other security agencies. But it's not proper for you to want to storm the government house, for you to want to penetrate the government house. It will constitute a security breach. It will constitute, it can lead to most serious, the law can, order may get out of hand. So we have to do the needful and so that they can peacefully disperse.
Okay. Okay, P.P. Harris, we're also looking at the fact that, like you just rightly said, peacefully dispersed protesters who probably had taken their protest to some violent, undertone. But then there are allegations that, firearms were shot, whether it was into the atmosphere or something, but firearms allegedly were shot at that protest yesterday. Are we in the right to assert that, or is this just allegations to, throw the information off balance?
Well, I don't know your definition of firearm, but I want to believe you. It connotes that arms,
live ammunition, we would say.
Some form of firing having to do with the use of maybe
live ammunition.
AK-47, AK. No, they weren't used. Nobody was shot at. There was no injury. However, tear gas, screech piece, a crowd disposing, rather crowd dispersing mechanism was used to ensure that the crowd can be dispersed. So tear gas were used, but not AK or maybe being shot at. Nobody was shot at. Nobody was injured. It's just to prevent. We had to barricade to prevent destruction of property or destruction of life at the government house.
So this was first of all geared at securing the government's house. Of course, it's the most important building at this time. So if reports of gunshots were heard, is this also alleging that it might have been the youth who gathered to protest that shot those, shots into the air?
Well, I wouldn't say that because, of course, if we have seen any youth shooting any form of gun, we would have apprehended the person. Well, based on the number, a whole lot of them, it is possible that anybody would have been armed. I do not know. I do not speak for them, but for the people that were there, we did not use we didn't do any form of firing, but we ensure that tear gas could be used or was used to disperse the crowd and prevent, when a gathering begins to become unruly, a gathering begins to become unorderly, the law permits us, grants of that to use commensurate or proportionate force to ensure that we can restore order at that point in time. And so we wouldn't have folded our hands and watch a set of persons try to run down the government house or try to create panic on the street, or try to hijack
any form of protest or turn a hitherto peaceful protest into a violent.
Okay, so I know that something you've asserted this morning is the fact that, you know, the leadership of the Nigeria Police Force in Akwa Ibom were even on hand to address the youth. But part of the allegations that we hear is the fact that there were no government official presence to address the youth. Hence, you know, how the protest spiraled out of place. I know that, you know, you are answering for the police force, but when we have these kinds of situations happening, government officials didn't come out to respond in the face of, you know, that protest by the youth, but only the police was present. What do you expect that the youth will, you know, do in those kinds of situations? Okay, I don't know if the PPRO is still available online with us this morning, but really serious conversations, because we need to look into these things. We'll get detail if it's still there. Another troubling conversation was the fact that the police PPRO at the national level, Olumiwa Adejobi, yesterday was saying that states should exhaust using their PPROs within the states before reaching out all the way to him at the national level. I wanted to ask Diko McDonald, you know, how that is being interpreted in Akwa Ibom State, because, you know, those conversations are really serious. It's more like, you know, he's saying he gets all the calls back and forth, but why doesn't, you know, citizens and state governments exhaust that? I think we still have Diko McDonald on the line for us. Please let us know if you're still there.
I'm with you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're just talking about the fact that your senior colleague in the PPRO business, Olumiwa Adejobi, was asking citizens to exhaust the use of their state PPROs before extending phone calls to him at the national level. It looks like there's been some incessant breach of protocol on the part of citizens with regards to this. Can you, you know, expatiate on the issue?
I didn't get that.
Okay, I'm saying that PPRO Olumiwa Adejobi at the national level for the NPF is asking citizens to make sure that they have exhausted the use of your office spread across the 36 states of the Federation before reaching out to him at the national level.
Yes. That's why we are here at the state levels. He cannot address, he addresses national issues. We address state issues, local issues. So it is pertinent that before a matter is taken to him, we should have, such a person should have exhausted all means of reaching out to us or getting solutions from us. And by the grace of God, some of us have been very proactive, or generally we've done a bit to try to be very proactive around the country to see that we can attend to state needs when it has to do with galvanizing PR, public relations, and attending to the needs of the people. So as much as possible, we'd like people to explore our internal approaches. Hotlines are there, online means of reaching us when it has to do with the social media, from Facebook, from Twitter, from WhatsApp, and all that. I think we've created this enabling environment where we can be accessed as a person, as an office, as a command. Here in Akwa Ibom State, we are easily accessed. Of course, you just reached out to me a couple of minutes ago, and I'm here talking to you. So we expect that people should be able to, when they have complaints, when they have needs, they should be able to reach out to us. And we will try as much as possible to see how we can address the needs of the people. Even though they're teeming, these needs seem to be teeming, and they come almost at all times, even at the dead of the night. But these are responsibilities that we have been saddled with, and we have to do everything possible to see that we can do them. So before getting to him, people should learn to exhaust our own internal or local mechanisms before going up there.
In Nigeria that is readily available and accessible to the media, but there are two sides to this. You're always there, but what happens in the situation where the matter at stake is coming from the force headquarters and we need his input, because there have been instances like that, and we reach out and we still get, to be referred back to the state, which of course we know, when we also speak to you through our consistent conversation, we know this falls within his purview to address this matter, because it's at the force headquarters and he's the right person to address. So in instances like that, what can the media do otherwise?
I want to know, was that for me? Hello? I didn't get that. I think the penultimate speaker is louder than you. I could hear her better than you, so I don't know.
Okay, so I'm saying, when issues like the force, people Olumi you just said, when issues are at the force headquarters, he's the one that is supposed to address it. But in situations where these issues are supposed to be addressed by him, we reach out to him and he's not available to answer this question. Of course, you cannot, because you are not at the force headquarters. How do we now get closure on these kinds of issues?
I don't understand you. I am talking to you now. I represent him. I represent the command at the state level. I am speaking on his behalf. What do you want to hear that you haven't heard? I am here to talk to you, and that's why I'm talking to you. What do you want to know? I'm available to talk to you. He cannot talk to you on all issues because he may have other issues he's addressing. He may not until maybe from we here we are able to keep him abreast of the issues. That's why we are here. That's why I am here at the state level. And that's why I'm talking to you. That's why it just took a text message from you, not even a call, and in the next 3-4 minutes, I'm already talking to you. So you did not need him. When you need him is if the issues have not been addressed by me or by the Commissioner of Police. That is when you need him. And he will need to get the facts from us. So you have me, you talk to me, whatever you questions you have, you ask me. If I am unable to address them the way that is expected of me or that you want it, that's when you reach out to him.
So much, Odiko McDon. We also do hope that we have, PPROs across the other 35 states of the Federation that are as responsive, and active as you are in Akwa Ibom State. That is one thing we can absolutely give you in the state. And we do also hope that when citizens put these calls that you actively respond to, that the police officers within the ranks in Akwa Ibom State are as aptly responsive to address the issues that they're being called upon to address. But thank you so much for reaching out to us and responding at very short notice because of the issue that arose, this morning. Thank you so much for taking our call and coming on Rise and Shine this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much. The pleasure is mine, and as an agency, we are committed to the cause of ensuring that we can continue to have a peaceful Akwa Ibom State. Let's make no mistake about this. Akwa Ibom State is peaceful. When you see what's happening in our neighboring states and some places, you will know that indeed Akwa Ibom State is peaceful. And so we should guide the peace jealously. Let's not do anything that will truncate it. We are not saying that people should not ventilate their grievances. People should not reach out. People should not make demands. These are constitutionally enshrined rights. They should be adhered to. But whenever we want to do this thing, let's be guided by public order. Let's be guided by, seeing that, look, we can. Bottom line is we shouldn't set fire on the state. Whatever we do, let's look at it that, look, we need to live and cohabit in a peaceful society. So for we, as the lead agency in internal security, working in collaboration with our sister security agencies, we will continue to see that we keep Akwa Ibom State safe for all of us, safe for children unborn, safe for investors, safe for tourists, and safe for residents of this state, so that people can continue to do their businesses, people can continue to sleep with their eyes closed. We are not saying that there are no criminality around here. Today, the Commissioner of Police, CP Olatoye Durosimi, will be having a press conference, a press briefing, and then you will see the lofty achievements of the command. We are not resting on our ass. We are not sleeping. We are not closing our eyes. We are doing everything possible to see that we can guarantee the peace and security of Akwa Ibom State. I want to assure Akwa Ibomites that we'll spend no resources in continuing to do this.
Thank you so much, Odiko McDon. We absolutely appreciate you and everything that the Nigeria Police Force is doing for Akwa Ibom State. Thank you once again, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Of course, very strong conversations there with Odiko McDon, SP Odiko McDon, who is the State Public Relations Officer for Akwa Ibom State, one of the very proactive ones that we have in the country, of course, always responsive and taking on the issues that we have. But we're going to take a quick break now and address other issues that we have on the buffet of Rise and Shine. When we continue, there's more topical issues that we need to look into this morning, so do stay with us.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on channel 421 on Star Times to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories and how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the Matters Council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court,
Is
my lord.
this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Glad to welcome you back at Still Rise and Shine. Of course, we've been live from here, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. We encourage you to follow us across social media platform. Right now, we've been joined by the State Director, CRAN, Twekong Franklin, and focus conversations will be a takeoff from what happened yesterday. Recall, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu addressed its ministers, of course, gave marching orders for the economy to be fixed and other issues as he unveiled his 8-point agenda for his administration. Twekong, good morning. Welcome to Rise and Shine.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Sorry we couldn't take you earlier on, but we do appreciate you taking out the time this morning to join the conversation. Yesterday we saw President Ahmed Bola Tinubu promising that his administration within the next 3 years is going to be able to bring in 50 million jobs across board. Now, I'd like to get to hear from you this morning. First and foremost, two things the president mentioned that, triggered the ears of Nigerians. First, that ministers who underperformed within his administrations were going to be fired. And then secondly, he's also looking at, the 50 million jobs to be created in 3 years. What is your reaction to this? Do you see the possibility of having the federal government create 50 million jobs and the possibility of also of having, the sack threat by President Ahmed Bola Tinubu being implemented against the ministers who might underperform?
First off, I think you will see Nigerians are not really excited about the announcement by the federal government, because this is not the first time we'll be hearing all of this. For us, it's a normal political statement that will not take us anywhere. The president has made the statement. Has there been any action since then? Have you heard? Has there been any foreign direct investment coming in? Has there been any deliberate policies to motivate the local investors? Have there been any direct policies or deliberate policies of the government to look towards the direction of SMEs in the country? So for me, and for Nigerians generally, it is just a normal political statement. They're hyping to further down tension on the suffering that Nigerians are passing through as a result of the sudden stoppage or removal of the fuel subsidy, which we knew were all scams. We would have been thinking that the president will be talking about how to mitigate the suffering of Nigerians, creating jobs, fine. Which are the policies backing it up? You've made a statement. Since then, I have not seen. I'm living in New York. Can I call you back?
We lost connection there, probably some of the network interference, but of course he was just talking about the president's comment and the fact that Nigerians are not pretty much excited. During the era of the just concluded administration of Muhammadu Buhari, we saw a lot of promises being made by the APC-led federal government, and most of those promises didn't see the light of day. Perhaps that explains why Nigerians are not super excited about the threat to sack ministers, especially looking at the fact that the ministerial list of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu just was mostly about recycling the same group of persons who had been in politics or had been in leadership position in their respective state, and many Nigerians have said these people did not do excellently well, except for a few, who stood out amongst them.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Otekon, welcome back. Sorry for the interference. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, so I haven't made the statement by Mr. President. I would have thought that there will be deliberate government policies to back it up, to motivate foreign direct investment by way of state power supply, to motivate private investors in the country by ensuring that there is good road network. The issue of insecurity is still on the high side. The foreign exchange is high. Naira to dollar is over 900 naira to a dollar. And so these policies statements are not being backed up by deliberate policies to mitigate the hardship we are passing through. We would have thought that the president would be talking about how to make sure that we have steady power supply, how to make sure that the dollar to naira, the naira that is on a free fall to dollar will find a way to to put a halt to it, and then encourage the SMEs in the country go into mechanized farming. Look at the farming sectors. Look at those who are into poultry. Look at those who are into fish farming and the rest. And then when you do this, you, without even saying it, you are creating employment. Without even saying it, the country will be better for it because economy will be boom. That is just it. The president should depart from, saying this. We had all this during the campaigns. We had all this creation of jobs. We will create this. Let us begin to see action. It is almost 100 days in office. What would the president be count? What will he be saying is his achievement in 100 days? That's the point. By now, we'll be counting the gains of his government. For me, people have died within the short time of 100 days. People have died because of the hardship imposed on Nigerians. And we are still discussing the issue of palliative, discussing the issue of a subsidy, the issue of I will create. When are you going to create these jobs? When? If these Nigerians are on their graves, who will not be the ones to be employed? That's the point. The other day from Commonwealth left Akwa Ibom to Sokoto, they were kidnapped. Insecurity is on the alarming side. And these are people whose parents have suffered, choice to pay their fees, and they spent 5 years in school, haven't done to serve the country. On their way to where they are posted to, they are kidnapped by kidnappers, and they are there. So the insecurity is becoming too high. The high cost of living, the power supply is not steady. The government should depart from telling us what you will do. You should start doing it. That's our point.
50 million jobs. It's a very lofty promise. Like you said, we no longer want to just hear about what we will do. But the NBS had come out to say that unemployment in Nigeria stood at 4.3%. And when these reports came out, a lot of Nigerians were reacting. Is it in the Nigeria we know or in the Nigeria that is to come that you're saying that unemployment stands at 4.3%? And yesterday, the former Bureau of Statistics boss had said they did not want to change the methodology used to come, to these numbers. But 4.3% rate of unemployment, is this even a reality in our country? And if at all the Tinubu-led administration can create 50 million jobs, cutting across collaborations between the private and public sectors, do you think we'll be able to push these numbers up in the country?
I don't want to comment on the NBS reports because I don't know where they're getting their own data from. Nigeria lacks data management system. We're talking about problems of the poor. We're talking about the underemployed. We're talking about the unemployed. How do you come about this data? All over the world, the only authentic means of getting data is through national census. But here in Nigeria, the figure keeps being falsified. You have data coming up being chunked out the policy of the poor. Why did the National Economic Council suspend the cash transfer of 10,000 to 8 million families? So because of the argument as to how did they come about the list, the database of the policy of the poor. So I don't want to even dabble into the argument as to the report of the NBS. My position remains that Nigeria is the center of poverty in Africa. Nigeria is the center of poverty in Africa because of bad leadership. Just this morning, we had a report that military has taken over Gabon. The other we are discussing about Niger. Why are we keep having coup taking over in the Africa and East Africa and the Central African countries? Why? It is because of lack of good leadership. Gabon is one of the most richest oil producing countries in the world. Gabon, very poor because of bad leadership. So what we are saying, our government should begin to discourage coup plotters. Governments in the ECOWAS countries, governments in this region, in the African countries, should be able to discourage coup plotters by beginning to, uphold rule of law, by beginning to bring good governance, by beginning to bring development, create employment. Let us depart from the drawing board of I will do this. Those are the campaigns, something that we have made. By today, the president would have told us, I have done this, I have done this. What we want to hear as Nigerians is what I have done as a president, not what I will do. We are part of the issue, how we were the promise. And that is what has brought you to the table. So the MBS report, statistics or whatever they have, I thought it. I think Nigeria remains the poorest country in the world, and Nigeria remains the center of poverty in the world. Now, let the president, now he has formed his cabinet. What I want to begin to see is let Nigeria become the center of construction. Every part of this country deserves development. Have you gone to the East-West Road? Have you gone to the Calabar to highway? The other day I was in Calabar. I drove through the road. I shed tears. If that road is under construction, the youth in other states will be engaged. The East-West Road, if the road is under construction, the youth in other stretch of road will be engaged. So you have opportunity to create employment and begin to, lessen the hardship we are passing through. Government should stop telling us, I will do this. Government should start telling us, I have done this, and this is what I think I have done.
Otuekong Franklin, you're throwing up a lot of issues this morning, and I appreciate that. And, just an aside, I would ask, because, like you said, rightly noted, Gabon has just ousted its leader. But you said poor leadership is a major problem in Africa. Why would you think that, why is it a problem of Africa? Because it's not in one nation. It has cut across several nations on the continent. Why is it that bad leadership is a thing that can be accrued, to African leaders? Why is that? Where did we get it wrong?
The president of Gabon had been in office for 14 years. And he recently won a third term on the 26th of August, that's today. He was announced to be the winner of the poll that was conducted by the Gabon Electoral Center. Now, the outcome of that election has been challenged. The process of his emergence has been challenged. The president's family has been in office for 53 years. Sit-tight syndrome. Is that democracy, for God's sake? It is not. The country doesn't belong to one man or one family. So what we are simply, even though we condemn military regime, we condemn coup plotters, we are simply saying, go and see Gabon. Gabon is one of the most richest crude oil producing countries in the world. But go and see Gabon. Look at the statement made out by the military men who seized power last night. I heard them in BBC saying that there is corruption in countries, institutions have failed, poverty everywhere, and lack of focus. And above all, the election that brought in the third term election that he won was marked with corruption and fraud. That is what the military men are trying to use to justify their action. Even though we, in CRAN, are condemning every military regime, we are calling on them to hand over powers, to hand over to civilian government. We do not believe that the way out is through military dictatorship. Now, having said this, away from that, if there is democracy in a country, what we want to see as semblance of democracy include freedom of speech, include good governance, include rule of law, include job creation, and then you fight against corruption. Before the pool was held in Gabon, the president shut down the entire internet system so that there will be no competition within the social media space, and then lockdown everywhere. So what are we trying to say? There was no freedom of speech, there was no, there was no fairness as alleged by the opponent. So we need democracy. Democracy, as it is practiced, encourage freedom of speech, good governance, accountability, rule of law. Go and check which African country is practicing this. Now, how do we discourage coup plotters? Is when these things are in place. Now, back to the Nigerian context. What we are saying is that we have just finished an election. The president of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is spending almost 100 days in office. What we want to hear from him today, by now, is what he has done, and not what he will do. When will he do it? Have you gone to the rural areas and seen people who have died? People have died in the course of waiting for the president to take action because of his action or inaction. People have died. He has brought up policies that he removed fuel subsidy, and that has imposed hardship on the economy. Nigerians are completely in pain and suffering and they're smiling. But we are very, very resilient and patient people. So the president by now should be telling us the number of jobs that have been created. It's very simple to create jobs. If you start to construct roads, national highways, you will create employment. If you start to go into mechanized farming, you create employment. If you bring in steady power supply, there will be boom in the economic sector. Right now, to buy diesel, to buy fuel, to run a small scale enterprise, how much do you spend in a month? So you keep seeing downsizing of workers because of what? Lack of available resources to continue to maintain the high number of workers in some industries. Because of what? Because of $1 rate is high, dollar to dollar is high, that is the forex, and then you come back to the country, you have insecurity, you have bad road network, you have lack of power supply. So by now, Nigeria should be reaping the dividends of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's election and presidency in the country, and not to be hearing him telling us, I will do this, I will do this. We passed the stage and the level of promises. We are now at the point of beginning to reap the dividends of democracy in Nigeria.
$100 days since President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into office. How do we expect that we'll already be able to be enjoying dividend of his campaign promises? It's been barely 100 days. How much can he do for a nation that has been plagued way before he came into office, within these 100 days? I think that's a really lofty expectation. But it takes me back to something you raised in part of your conversation this morning. Now, when we also ask that the federal government or state governments should move into rural communities and state governments to get things done as and when due, we are also having issues where we see governments move to make their presence felt in these places, but yet youths and members of communities or even state governments arise and try to stand in the way of this project. You had mentioned, the Calabar to highway. How many times have we had communities along that way clash and saying, oh, this boundary is for us, this boundary isn't for us? For instance, I was raising a conversation this morning. These very deplorable roads that you know about leading to our stations, an agency tried to work on it, and just yesterday, community members arose, decided to loot the materials that have been brought to work on that road. Is this also still something that the government has to pay for? What happens to, citizens contributing their quota to development coming into their areas?
Well, you see, it is a pathetic situation that the citizens have seen themselves as we against government. The way the government has operated has made it look like it is an elitist government, and it makes the citizens to see themselves. Whatever the government is bringing to your own area, it is like it is your own share of the national cake. The issue you just mentioned about the Ijakuban, I think I heard an interview by the very prominent son of Ijakuban, Mr. Tony Afia, talking about it, condemning it, and warning the community people to desist from it. and also blocking the road, asking for compensation and all this and all that. I think that the best way out for all of this is when the government is taking a project to a community, you'll be able to make it put on, and this is your own project. People should take ownership of it. Yes, the attitude of people over the years, like for instance, you see the government is building a road project, you go see people going to a tombstone, graveside and all those stuff, asking for compensation and all that, and sometimes we even put structures demanding for payment and all those things. This is what I think has become a norm in the culture of the people, because they also feel that is the only opportunity that they can also make it or get their own share of the national cake. This is condemnable. I want to also plead that Nigerians should begin to take ownership of government properties, take ownership of government projects. If the government puts a power supply line in your community, don't allow it to be vandalized. Protect it, secure it. Talk about insecurity today. Yes, you can also secure your facilities. The government is coming to build an industry in your community, and the equipment that they have brought in have been looted. Government won't be happy to come back to continue to spend money in buying those equipment. Maybe when they were bought, dollar to naira was low, but now dollar to naira has increased. So the community should also form vigilante system to be able to protect government facilities, so that government will be able to continue to complete those projects. Most of these projects, like we have in the Okwibuku paper mill, that plant has been completely vandalized, and the part stolen by some of by some people who are from the communities themselves. You see, because maybe they see it as a federal government project, or they see it as a government thing, and they don't have job, and so what they feel they can get from government is to go and steal government facility or government project, which is wrong, highly condemnable. And when this continue to make the people, when a few criminal-minded individuals, carry out this act, it makes the entire community to go into hardship and pains. Now imagine saying that the people of Ijakuran have passed through over the years. Now you have an industry like Spectrum TV, like Planet TV in that community, yet you don't have access road, both from the Toronto axis and from the Calabar to highway. You don't have any access road. The business is, the business won't go where it should go. As you have access road, then if a government company or agency comes in to begin to make attempts to give access road to the community, not to this. It's the work on the community leaders to now form vigilante system to protect one, the company, and then two, the facility that the company is using to make those access roads. So as the company will now be motivated, the government or the agency will be encouraged to complete the project. That's what I want to say on that, because it's very sad. It's not only in Yakuran, it's all over the country. I just told you, go to airport road. You will see people just putting up tombstones, putting on grave sites on the highway just because the government has carried out a project to expand the highway. And this is bad. That's just the point I want to make on that regard.
For giving us your time this morning. Just before I let you go, one last thought on an issue that happened yesterday. We have spoken to the police PPRO, this morning, looking at the security end. But Akwa Ibom youths came out yesterday to protest that the state government should give them 3% out of the 13% derivation fund, assigned to the state government for them to mitigate, unemployment and other related issues. Of course, as allegedly reported, no state government official came out to address the youth who came out to protest, and of course it skyrocketed into other issues. But looking at the youth requesting for 3% out of the 13% derivative fund, do you think that they are in their right to make this request? And if given to them, would this be judiciously used to alleviate poverty and create employment in the state?
I want to give the governor, the present governor, Pastor Omar, the benefit of the doubt that he has captured so much on his arrest agenda to take care of the youth, unemployment, create jobs, to boost the economy of the state, and do all those things that will, endanger small scale and medium scale enterprises in the state. Now, I've not seen any part or any state in the 9 oil producing communities where 3% of the 30% is given to a particular segment of the people. When you give to youth 3%, the elders will also come to demand. Assuming you give you 3%, give elders 3%, women 3%, the physically challenged 3%. You see that the money will not be able to be used for anything tangible. What I want to assert is that the government should establish Akwa Ibom Oil Mineral Producing Commission that would be managing the 30% fund, as you have in Delta called the SEPADEC, as you have in Imo, as you have in other oil producing states like Ondo. You have it. Akwa Ibom is one of the richest crude oil producing states. So the governor should sponsor a bill to establish Akwa Ibom State Oil Mineral Producing Commission to be able to take care of the 30% derivation fund. This commission will be able to capture the interest of the youth, the elderly, the pregnant women, the students, the physically challenged, and development in the rural communities. That's what I think is the best, rather than sharing the money to youth. Who are these youth? And how many are they? That's the point. Then when you share the money to youth, what happened to the elderly? What happened to the women? What happened to the students? What happened to the security? You have this issue coming up. So you have to cure this menace and cure this challenge, establish a commission to manage the fund. And then that commission will be able to address this issue and have a database on how to be able to manage these various complaints that will arise from various segments of the state.
So much, Otwekon Franklin, chairman of CRAN in Akwa Ibom State, for giving us your time and taking on, some of these very serious issues happening around the country at this time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you. We don't know if you have any last words that you would like to share with Nigerians or Akwa Ibomite for that matter.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing me on board. My last word is that Nigerians should continue to be resilient, be patient, have faith, and be prayerful that the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will live up to our expectations. In Akwa Ibom State, we should continue to be resilient, be prayerful, and have faith that the governor will live up to our expectations. Generally speaking, I want to say that democracy is the best system of governance than any military rule. And so we are condemning the military takeover of civilian government in Gabon, Niger, and other African countries.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been such a great delight speaking with you and looking into these issues. Of course, we've been speaking with the director of CRAN, Akwa Ibom State, Otwekon Franklin, looking into several issues that cut across different sectors and concerns of Nigeria as a country and Nigerians as citizens. But at this point, that's where we're going to allow that conversation to rest. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, we'll bring you the concluding part of Rise and Shine this morning. Stay with us.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying tuned. This is still Rise and Shine Midweek Edition, brought to you by Spectrum Television, all the way from Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital. We've been looking at very serious conversations this morning, and one way for you to catch up on all that is if you follow us across all our social media platforms, all of which you can find at spectrumtv.ng. We also like to tell you that real time you can watch Spectrum Television on the go. Just follow us at www.spectrumtv.ng and you would be able to catch up real time on everything that's going on our screens. But